Hello everybody, time to tackle the swing arm. For parts of the motorcycle like the swing arm, which have slightly more complex shapes than other parts of the bike, you might need to hit up the internet for more visual references. I'll check out motorcycle forums, technical manuals, and even sites that sell motorcycle parts. From the gizmo, we're going to choose the polycube, and then press delete loops to get rid of the edge loops. Now you might notice the topology here will be pretty minimal. And while it may seem like good topology, it's actually what we call blockout topology or construction topology. This keeps things low res to help us manipulate the form. It's not optimized at all. By the end of the blockout for the swing arm, we'll be using Dynamesh. And once all the blockouts are done, that's when we do the final retopology. My plan for this piece is to build the front part first. Then I want to work on the end of the swing arm next. This will help me get a better handle of the distance and angle. Once we've got the proportions and form established, we can use the existing topology of the front and rear pieces of the swing arm to extrude the form. So up until now, I've mentally divided the swing arm into 3 separate parts. I started with the most basic form of the front part of the swing arm, a tapered cube. From there, I'm adding in edge loops to define more of the form and to set up for Qmeshing the whole. Once I've got a couple of edge loops in place, I'll use the Move Infinite Depth Brush and start adjusting the points to create the shape before Qmeshing. If the Move brush causes too much distortion, I'll switch to the ZModeler brush and use the slide point action. If the geometry gets a little warped from the Move brush, it's a quick fix with the Clip Curve brush. Once the points are roughly where I want them, I'll Qmesh the polys through. Press QC50 and see how it looks with dynamic subdivisions and creasing applied. Next I'll switch to the ZModeler brush and choose Crease for the edge action to adjust some of the creases. Press Ctrl W to group visible and set the crease level to 3. Alright, let's go back to our trusty Move Infinite Depth brush and make a few minor tweaks to the model before we push forward. I'll keep modifying the shape of the swing arm, spending a fair amount of time on this blockout stage. This is because once you start adding in the details later, it becomes much harder to go back and make adjustments to these primary shapes. So it's better to take your time now and get it right. To start, control-click on the canvas to mask the model, then bring up the gizmo. From the gear, choose the polycube. Next, we're going to invert the mask and select Split Unmask Points. Press Delete Loops and turn off Dynamic. Then move the cube into position and start making adjustments with masking and the gizmo. Let's grab the ZModeler brush next. For the edge action, you want to select Slide, and for the target, choose Edge. Switch to Insert a Single Edge Loop. Next, let's get back to the Move Infinite Depth brush and move the points back a bit. Then press QC50 and grab the ZModeler brush to make some adjustments to the creases. Finally, let's make a couple more adjustments using the Move Infinite Depth brush. Let's throw in a couple of edge loops to prepare ourselves for the upcoming extrusion. Then we'll switch back to our Move Infinite Depth brush to reposition the points. To continue fine-tuning our edge flow, we need to switch back to the ZModeler brush. This time, we'll select Slide for the edge actions and Edge for the target. For the polygon action, we'll choose Transpose, and for the target, a single poly. To extrude, we need to hold Control and move with the gizmo. For me personally, I find it easier to use the mask lasso brush when points start to get a little tricky to mask. Now add a single edge loop and keep adjusting the points to create the form. Unmask the face and Control move with the gizmo to extrude. I found getting some of these angles pretty challenging, mainly because I didn't have the best reference to guide me. So it was just a matter of making a lot of small adjustments until it started feeling right. When you're low on references, you gotta rely on your instincts. You might be wondering, what do you do when you're working on a part and you only have one or two angles, and you're missing a big chunk of that image? How do you know when it feels right? What I did in this situation was look at similar single-sided swing arms and get a general idea of the form. Another useful strategy is to stick with the same company that built the part. So what I did is search for Kawasaki single-sided swing arms and other Ninja single-sided swing arms. While a lot of them were way too different in style to make a comparison, some were similar, and also some H2 reference images popped up that I haven't found in my previous searches. Unmask the face and extrude it with the gizmo. And then move it close to the front of the swing arm. Regularly snapping to camera views help me check my angles against the references I have. Let's add an edge loop in the middle to give the mesh more of a curve. A really cool edge action is Move Infinite Radius. It moves the entire edge loop based on the camera view. So I still find myself switching frequently between the saved camera views trying to figure out this shape. It's a process, but we're getting there. Turning off dynamic can be really handy when you're trying to clean up and spot surface errors. Next, select the front part of the swing arm. We're going to add an edge loop to both the bottom and the top of it. With the point action of slide selected and brush size as our target, we can start adjusting the points to set the stage for our upcoming extrusion. For the ZModeler brush, choose Transpose a Single Poly, then Alt-tag the bottom 3 faces. From the top view, control and move with the gizmo to extrude. Now mask and reposition the faces. Unmask the face and extrude the single poly. Let's also enable triangle snap so we can skip collapsing the 2 extra edges later. Press QC50 to check out how it's looking. Again, with Transpose a Single Poly selected, Alt-tag the bottom faces to make adjustments with the gizmo. I'm just trying to make sure everything's aligned right before we connect the 2 pieces. Press Ctrl W to group visible. Then switch to Move Infinite Depth Brush to straighten the back. Go ahead and select the other subtool and line it up with the front of the swing arm. Merge the subtool down with the UV turned off. Press QC50 once more, and let's fix up some of the creasing errors. Okay, let's keep going. We'll start by using Qmesh a Single Poly and adjusting points to better match our reference. You might notice a lot of shading issues on the surface of the model, but don't worry about that for now. Our main focus should be on getting the primary shapes right, and we can clean up those shading issues later. Next, select Insert Multiple Edge Loops with specified elevation. We're simply aiming to add some more even topology to our mesh. Then we can switch to the Crease Edge action. Now let's fix up some of the creasing errors. Before we start connecting the middle section of the swing arm, it needs a bit of flaring out to match the angle. To do this, grab the Move brush this time because we only want to move the points within the brush radius. Next, we'll add an edge right down the middle, so we can achieve the correct thickness when extruding. For this, select Slice Mesh for the edge action. To start a slice mesh, click on a point or edge. When you click on your next point or edge, you'll notice a straight line forms between the first and second click. This even works if you skip over edges or polys. To lock it in or start from somewhere new, hit the spacebar. After that, select Delete Edge to remove any unwanted edges. Now select Qmesh a single poly and alt tag the 3 polys. Press QC50 and use the Move Infinite Depth brush to make some adjustments. Snap to the bottom view and match the extrusion to the curve of the swing arm. Next, match the angle in the front view and do the same for the rear view. Let's also uncrease the 2 edges. Press Ctrl W to group visible, then make a few more small adjustments before we move on. Now from the ZModeler brush, let's alt tag these faces to transpose them. We're going to transpose these polys instead of using Qmesh because we'll have some scaling and repositioning to do right after the extrusion. It's just quicker to start with the gizmo rather than Qmesh then switch to the gizmo. Now snap it to the front view and grab the Move brush. From the bottom view, we'll try to keep the same curvature. Now slide the edge loop down halfway. This way we can adjust the curvature a bit better using the Move brush. Go ahead and uncrease the edges to see how the curve is coming along. Given the number of angles and curves this swing arm has, the modeling process is turning into a bit of a push and pull technique. Unmask the bottom faces and extrude with the gizmo. Holding down Alt will unlock the gizmo so you can move it without affecting the geometry. Once it's repositioned, scale it along the Z axis. Now switch to the ZModeler brush and select Insert Multiple Edge Loop, so we can insert an edge loop perfectly in the middle. Let's go ahead and select Bridge for the polygon action and 2 polys for the target. Collapse the 2 edges to remove the small face. Then use the Slice Curve brush to add in an edge loop so we can make it a quad face. Unmask the edge and move it down with the gizmo. Go ahead and collapse the small edges. Then let's delete the 2 edges. Switch to the Move brush and make a few more adjustments. Alt tag the 2 remaining faces and Qmesh them down. Unmask the bottom 3 faces and use the Clip Curve brush to straighten them. Clear the mask and press QC50. Then go ahead and press Ctrl W to group visible. Unmask the bottom 3 faces and scale them back. Making sure we get the right angle is so important before we bridge the faces. Uncrease a couple of edges and make some adjustments with the Move brush. You'll also have to adjust these faces. They seem to fall flat when viewed from the back. Go ahead and select Mask for the edge action and Edge for the target. Unmasking a few edges and running a small Polish by Features is a great way to smooth out a low poly surface. Then slide the edges to give them some space and relieve the tension. Then go ahead and uncrease some edges that were left over from running the QC50. While we're at it, let's slice in an edge loop. Slice is a great alternative to insert edge loop when dealing with triangle faces. Let's do one more slice to clean up the triangle faces on the top and bottom. Then go ahead and delete any leftovers. Add in another edge loop right in the middle so we can match the poly count when we bridge the faces. Alright, let's bridge 2 polys for the polygon action and then Qmesh that single poly down. Press QC50 and Ctrl W to group visible. Next, we're going to uncrease all those interior edges. Now select Insert Multiple Edge Loops from the ZModeler brush. Crease those 2 edges, then clip the edges back in between the creased ones. Choose Slide Edge Loop Complete and start sliding those edges to control the fall off. If you select Insert Single Edge Loop, you can also manipulate the fall off. Set the crease level to 2 to soften the bevel effect. Then we need to crease and uncrease the necessary edges. Slice in an edge loop and slide the points on top to help with the Qmeshing. We'll then do some crease cleanup. Since this was our construction topology, we need to set up Dynamesh to continue the modeling. So for Dynamesh utility, set the blur to 0, poly count to 1,000,000, and select Use Auto Scaler. Smooth out some of that rough pinching caused by the creasing. Let's control click on the canvas to mask the model. Bring up the gizmo and position it into place. From the gizmo's gear, select the cylinder 3D. Set the H divides to 100. Then rotate it in the x-axis and scale and position it into place. Next, control drag on the canvas to clear the mask. Let's make sure the circle is open on the resolution slider. Click and drag the picker to the model to set the resolution. Control drag on the canvas to run a Dynamesh. A little bit more polishing with the sculpting brushes and this piece will be ready to retopo. Of course, if you want, you can use the construction model we did and do some topology fixes on that. Totally up to you. But for me, there are enough flat open spaces on the swing arm to retopo it pretty quickly.